Welcome back to the Regent Law podcast. I am really excited today to have Chris Davis join us, who's an alumnus of the law school, and we are going to get into a lot of things law and what it means to be a good attorney led by the Holy Spirit. So, Chris, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I have become friends with Chris over the years. We've gone out to lunch a couple of times and been at a few events together. So thanks for joining us today, brother.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you are the founding attorney of Davis Burch Abrams here in Chesapeake, Virginia, correct?
I am? Yeah.
So you want to tell us a little bit about your firm?
Sure. So we are a business law firm. We primarily handle commercial litigation, business transactions, M&A, capital raises, things like that. Started the firm in 2014. So we're
Fantastic.
11 years in. We have 12 lawyers right now, and we have a vision of growing to 100 lawyers by 2040.
Wow,
That's the plan.
that's fantastic. Where did that vision come from?
It came from a lot of soul searching, and I didn't initially plan to start a law firm. I practiced law for about 7 years, and for a local publicly traded franchise in Virginia Beach. And I left, and I thought I'm not going to practice law for a little while. I'm gonna do something different. And so I got involved in another business that I was really excited about, and these clients. I didn't have a website. I didn't have anything. I decided I wasn't going to practice. And these clients started coming out of the woodwork, people I'd never met in my life. I'm not advertising, I'm not soliciting, I'm not trying. And so they just kept coming and asking me to take over a large lawsuit or whatever. And my wife said, I think God's trying to tell you something. And so I kind of accidentally started a law firm. And so, I set up a website. The website had a picture of the World Trade Center in Norfolk, and it said Davis Law because my name is Davis, and I decided I guess I'm going to do law. So that's what I came up with was Davis Law. I put a phone number, no address, and a picture of the World Trade Center. That was my whole website. That's it. For like a year or maybe two. And clients just kept coming, and I finally just said, God, you are leading me, you are directing the ship, and I am not trying to make this work, but apparently this is the plan. So started the firm, and then I realized after starting the firm, after a little while, that that the way we were doing things was a little different than other firms. Lawyers are by nature just unhealthy, unhappy people,
Right.
especially in big law. They
A
build
lot of pressure,
a lot of pressure.
competitive.
Very competitive. Unfortunately, lawyers have some of the highest rates of substance abuse, suicide, divorce, mental illness. Lawyers can be very unhealthy, and Regent certainly does an amazing job, I think. As a Regent grad, of trying to reverse that trend.
Right. Trying to prepare you for that, but you still are going to have to battle it on your own.
You still have to battle that. And so, but what we created was a model where we have a healthy environment, where we have a reasonable billable hour requirement, where, we're positive, we're faith-based, and, in all of that, we have happy, healthy lawyers. And,
Right.
and then we've created a model where I think we have healthy, happy clients, and we provide a quality work product for a reasonable price. And I found those two things are kind of unique. And so I thought, well, if that's what God's given us, these two kind of magic things, then why would we stay small? Why not grow that and create a space where we can further the kingdom, but also further the practice of law in a healthy way. And so that's what we're doing.
Man, that's fantastic. I think you touched on 8 things I'd love to talk about within that, but I think the overarching theme here, what I enjoy about you, Chris, is when we met, and you probably don't even remember this, but I think the first time I heard you spoke when I was still a student about you were just on a panel, and I remember hearing from you. But over the last couple of years, we've gone out to lunch a couple of times, and often we start talking shop. I mean, we're talking about the practice of law, and what I enjoy about you is, I mean, I think you represent the law school well. What we're trying to produce is really good attorneys, not just really good Christians. We're trying to produce both. We're trying to produce people who are really worth being hired as attorneys,
Yeah.
who really help people. And I mean, I've said this so many times. You never want to hire an attorney for the most part, unless you're really proactive, or maybe it's estate planning or something. But often you're hiring someone to get out of a jam or do something really complicated, something you need an advisor on. And so we take it really seriously at the law school that we want our attorneys to be excellent, excellent attorneys. Um, and we would love them, if they don't already know God, to find God and become amazing people who love God. And because we believe if you love God, you'll love people
Mm.
uh, as best as possible.
Yeah.
Loving God, loving people. And so we're trying to create people full of the love of God who become amazing attorneys. So when I talk to you, I love hearing about the grittiness of the practice of law, the hard work it requires, running a law firm, all that. But I often hear stories about how God leads you, and you're quite surprised in that.
Mm.
Even when you
Mm.
got to law school, and we can tell this story kind of quick, but you had a pretty unusual path to law
Mm.
school.
I did.
Did you go to tell us the story? I kind of know the answer to this. Did you go to
Yeah.
undergrad thinking, I can't wait to be an attorney? I'm going to go do pre-law.
Yeah, no, I didn't. So I went to a small Bible school in upstate, rural New York, called Elam Bible Institute, unaccredited, and I went there for 1 year. And I went because my mom said, I really want you to go to the school, so I did. And then my parents became missionaries, and I stayed there. And I love business. I started my first business when I was 14, so I've always been an entrepreneur.
What was that?
I did computer repair. I built computers, and I just loved it. And I mean, I was always like, how do I make money? I'll mow lawns, shovel sidewalks, whatever. It's where I was in Pennsylvania, rural New York, there's snow most of the year, so you got
Yeah.
a lot of shoveling. uh, so
Not a
I go
good
to the,
business model for Virginia Beach.
yeah, a little different than here. So anyway, I go to this little school, and they had a 3-year program, and I stayed there, and I ended up finishing their 3-year program in 5 years. It took me 5 years to finish a 3-year program, but I really wanted to get an MBA. That was like, I just love business, so I was trying to figure out how I'm going to do that, and then Regent sent some recruiters to bring people from Elam to the divinity school, and somehow I convinced them to take me to come talk to the MBA folks. And so I did talk to the MBA program, and they said, what is your undergraduate degree? And I said, I don't really have one. And so they said, take the GMAT and talk to us again. So I took the GMAT, did pretty good, talked to them, and they said, well, how about we'll let you in on provisional status? And I said, sounds great. So I moved to Virginia Beach on provisional status in the business school, and did really well after the first year. And they took me off of provisional status, so I'm in, in the regular program. And so then I just, was thinking about it, praying about it, talked to my mom, and my mom said, haven't you always thought of going to law school? And I was like, yeah, but you're supposed to have a bachelor's degree for that. And so anyway, I go talk to the law school, and I said, hey, I'm in the MBA program. Could I do a joint degree? And they initially were like, yeah, probably. Did you take the LSAT? Where'd you get your undergrad? Yeah, funny story. So I did the LSAT, did well on the LSAT, and then they said, well, we'll let you in on provisional status. Like, well, I've been through that before. So, I was
Let's
provisional
do it.
status for like one semester and did great. And so then they made me official. So anyway, I finished with an MBA, JD. And technically, I have no bachelor's degree. So there's my unique unique path.
No doubt, no doubt. What an unusual,
Yeah.
unusual path. And then, do you feel like after you graduated and took the bar, it continued to be like what was your first job out of law school?
Yeah, I was hired by this. It was a local franchisor,
Okay.
large, 4,000 offices, United States, Canada, and
Wow.
publicly traded. And so I was one of the initial lawyers there. When I left, there was 8 lawyers, but in-house counsel doing commercial litigation, it was a great experience. They sent me pro hoc vice to litigate cases all over the country.
Wow.
So, I was 1 year out of law school in a company, flying to Connecticut or California or Florida or whatever, and I would try cases, and a lot of times I would sit first seat, and they would bring in some AM 100 partner to sit next to me and tell me what to do, stand up, object, say this, do this. So
Okay, I've got a
I,
question for you. We've
I
got a lot of prospective students listening. I mean, is this normal for right out of law school? Is it? I mean,
that's unusual.
I imagine some of them might think, does law school in general across the board prepare people to do that? I mean, get out of law school in the first year, traveling around the country and sitting first seat, and the more experienced attorney at a more well-respected firm is supporting me. Why do you think you were prepared to do that?
Uh, that was just God's providence. It's just kind of part of my whole story. When I was in law school, I got married right before my 3L year, which it worked out really great for me, but I don't recommend it. And Jim Duane has great advice, and he's right. So normally you should not do that, but it worked out great for me. Um, but anyway, so we got married, and I really wanted to do something with litigation, intellectual property, and I just all my prof said you're gonna need to leave Hampton Roads because there's not a lot of that kind of work here. And so we thought about going to DC or New York, and um, I remember late at night in my 3L year, I was studying for something, and I saw a job posting for this company doing it's basically franchise and IP litigation. And I woke my wife up, and I brought my laptop. She was sound asleep. I said, "This is my job," and she's like, "How do you know?" I'm like, "I'm gonna get it. This is it right here." And it was the only job I applied for, and I got it. And it just felt like God just led me. I love the verse in Proverbs: "A man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. How then can a man understand his own way?" And
Mm.
so my life is, when I look back at it, I just see God kind of leading from place to place. So, your question was, is that a normal experience? I don't think it's normal in the traditional textbook sort of way, but it's just how God led me. So, having the Holy Spirit lead you is a unique advantage.
Yeah, which is available to every believer, right?
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask a further question on that. I love the verse you shared. Share it one more time.
A man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. How then can a man understand his own way?
So discerning the voice of God, working with a God who speaks to us. But the beginning of that is a man plans his steps.
Yeah.
So there's going to be people who don't know God, who aren't Christians, who watch this episode, and different types of Christians with different theology. And we've used, honestly, probably more than often from the beginning of this episode, I've used Holy Spirit language. He's
Yeah.
directing me and things like that. So I want you to demystify this a little bit. I often found I didn't become a Christian until later in life, and I remember sometimes I would hear people talking about, and God told me this, or God
Mm.
spoke to me that. You've referenced God kind of leading you, not as much speaking to you so far, but God led me here. And what does that look like? And it might be different every time, but what does it look like to be led by God in this? Maybe we have a student right now in undergrad somewhere that is contemplating going to law school, and it feels like a big risk or not something they've thought about before. What what advice would you say about hearing from God or being led by God?
That's a That's an amazing and deep question, and I'm no expert on it, by far. I have very rarely ever had an experience. One time I think, but for the most part, I've never really felt like I've heard God speak to me in a very direct way. Not like an audible voice. It's not been so much like that. A little bit, but not so much. For me, it's more been acknowledging God in everything, and when I look at nature and creation, and humankind and everything, I see the work of a divine creator, and I believe that he's involved in our lives, and I can see how when I acknowledge God in my work,
That's good.
um,
Acknowledge. That's what I was thinking.
yeah, I can see how doors open and paths are made, and wisdom is huge, I think, right? Like Book of Proverbs is one of my favorite books of the Bible, and it talks about, like, one verse says that wisdom makes knowledge acceptable. And we live in a day and age where there's so much knowledge, right? There's big data. We have endless information, but what I think we're lacking in America right now, and in so many things, is wisdom, and wisdom comes from God, right? And that's what I pray. I ask God to give me wisdom, favor and wisdom, and then acknowledging Him, and then waiting on that, and then I can see how my path gets directed and led.
Right. Yeah, I think that was big acknowledgement. Sometimes even just as you acknowledge that it's not just you in charge here. It's not just me and my hustle grinding. That's big in lawyer culture, right? Hustle grinding. When I acknowledge that I'm not the most important piece on my puzzle,
Yeah,
that I remember that God speaks, that He cares, that He probably has opinion. It's by acknowledging it really to myself, that
yeah,
I'm going to posture myself to then receive.
yeah.
It's kind of a posture of humility, and being humble is a good thing. Um, you learn, you hear, you listen. Um, okay, I want to get back to your area of law. So, what do you still practice, or do you just run your firm?
It's I still practice. I'm trying to practice less every year, and I'm trying to delegate more of that to my staff. But I just had a big jury trial a couple months ago, and so I'm still actively practicing. So we're slowly moving down. I primarily do commercial litigation.
Right. So, litigating a jury trial. So, tell me some challenges. What's it like trying to you started a firm
Yeah.
to build it. Now you're talking about 10x your firm.
Yeah.
Um, what's it? And it would make sense that in years to come that you'll eventually stop doing that. So that's one thing that you would do, right? The more non-practicing things you have to. Some things have to fall off in order to pick up more. So
Yeah.
while you're still practicing, what does that look like to practice and lead a firm?
It's tricky. I definitely don't recommend that people start a law firm right out of law school. Some
Yeah.
people do it and it works. That's hard. But learning the skill of practicing law is that's a skill set. Learning how to lead people is something that I have a long ways to go on, but that's a lot of work. That's a skill set, and there's definitely a difference between running a law firm and being a lawyer. They're just completely different skills, and so obviously they're related, but very, very different. So kind of going back and forth, it's definitely a challenge, but I enjoy it. It's fun. I initially started the firm by myself out of my living room.
Yeah.
So I did everything. I was paralegal. I was
Intake.
marketing, IT, and the lawyer. And it was the early days. It was like a client paid their bill, and about 3 hours later, I paid my mortgage. It was kind of like, you know, that's how it started. I actually remember when I first started. I didn't. When you're in law school, you have unlimited access to Lexis and Westlaw, and it's the best. You got
Right.
all the features, and they get you hooked in law school, and you're like, it's amazing. And then you go work for a law firm, and you get some very limited subset of that,
Right. 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 Right.
and I had that at the corporate job. I had a limited subset, and then when I go on
And
my
then you
own,
start your own law firm, and
yeah, and I'm like, I gotta get Lexus or Westlaw or something. And so I'm looking, and I'm negotiating, and I finally found a contract. I think it was with Westlaw, I can't remember if it was Lexus or Westlaw, one of them, but it was like $140 a month, and it was a year-long contract, and I remember agonizing over that, like,
$1,500
oh
or
my gosh. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a serial entrepreneur, very successful businessman, and I said, "What do I do?" And he looked at me, he's like, "Are you starting a business or not? Like, this is dumb. Like, sign this contract." But that's how I started. It's just small, and then at every step, you hire one employee, and then okay, now I've got another litigator, and then the role kind of changes and morphs, and so it's been a learning process for me.
are you starting a business? Are you planning to make money and succeed?
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, you have little faith. uh,
Um, okay, you mentioned why wouldn't we grow this law firm? We have, I think you
mm,
said we have healthy, happy lawyers, healthy, happy clients. So I want to ask you about that. It seems like you're proud of your culture, you're enjoying your culture, and you referenced just a fact that every law school in America is teaching quite a bit, which is uh, lawyers have the propensity to become substance abuse, depressed, intense people without great habits, and
yeah,
the stats are bad.
yeah.
So that's the norm, and you're saying healthy, happy. Why wouldn't we grow this thing? So, what would you say is important culture-wise to have the type of firm you want? And success is different. Everybody gets to define it themselves, and your favorite things about your firm may not be the favorite of someone else. But what would you say has been really important for you culture-wise in building this?
Yeah. Billable hours definitely an important component. That's certainly not everything. That's a big piece of it, though. Number one. Number two, we have a big emphasis on team, right? And you think a lot of law firms do that, but they don't really. Is a lot of solo kind of lawyers inside of a large law firm,
Do you
and
mean practice or hangouts outside of work? What
well, I
describe?
guess I mean both, but I'm not so much focused on the hangout.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't just pair lawyers together, but we have meetings every 2 weeks where we talk about all of our projects together, and we try to make sure things are balanced. We get insight from others, and we prioritize. I have a big thing where I say there's no such thing as work-life balance, because I don't believe anything in life is ever balanced, right? Somebody gets sick, it's not balanced. Somebody dies, your life's not balanced. You have a baby, your life's not balanced, right? So we don't believe in work-life balance. We believe in prioritization. So it's God first, family second, work third. And and here we are at work, and I'm telling everybody that we're third in line. But, that doesn't mean that we don't have incredibly intense periods, because it's not
Right.
balanced. If you have a trial, I'm sorry, you're not doing anything. You're not going to church, and you're not spending time with your family. You're going to be in this office until we're done prepping for trial, right? That's what's going to happen, because we're going to be the best, and we're going to do a really, really awesome job. But you keep your priorities long term in line. So that's a big part of our culture, and so I think that goes a long way, and I think people appreciate that and understand that. And I was talking to a lawyer just the other day that was a very large law firm in the community, tried to recruit him, and he with a very impressive salary, and he decided to stay. And one of the things that we talked about was, I said, if you go there, and we talked about it. I said, their philosophy and their culture is going to be, the billable hour is the most important thing. Bill,
Right.
bill, bill. And if you say something about my family or my wife, they'll say, shut up. Don't want to hear it. Don't talk about that. Like, that's on your own time. You go home, talk to you about your wife or kids. No, no. When you're here, you bill. That's what you do here. Go home and deal with that stuff later. And that's just not our culture,
Right.
right? Humans first.
Right. Now you said I think to just dive into that a little bit more. Now you said the long-term prioritization, so that over time you could look back on your time in your calendar and the things you are at and say, yeah, if you look at all this, my priorities are in order. But like you said, if there's a jury trial on Monday morning and you've got a church retreat that weekend, that if you are prioritizing family, church, work, whatever they are in order, you got to go to the retreat, right?
Well, if you're trying to balance everything, right,
Yeah,
that's balancing. Prioritization, things are out of balance. It's just you have to look long term because in the narrow window of a moment, there's something that's always going to trump, right? It's because it never is always just even keel. You got everything all just balanced just right, That's what I'm saying. Like you got to balance. You have a baby, and I'm not going to be at the office. I'm prioritizing that. We had one of my employees, his wife just had major surgery, so it's like, okay, well, that's your priority. You're going to take care of her, and the team is going to step up, and we're
right.
going to do what we got to do while you're out. And that's cool. Like we're all here for each other, and we support each other. So that's part of this culture of we're here to support each other and help each other. We're not here to competitive for sure, but there's that prioritization is important.
That's awesome. What would you say you're most excited about with the law firm right now?
Hmm. I'm excited about our growth. I'm excited about, um, I love excellence. I just like putting out really high quality work is just, it gets me super excited. And when a lawyer sends me a brief and I read it, I'm just like, that's unbelievable and amazing. I get excited about that. And so I get excited about changing the community, kind of not just Hampton Roads, but Hampton Roads, Richmond, and kind of mid-Atlantic. That's what I think our footprint's going to be in the next 15
Wow,
years, with a reputation of excellence and of quality, in terms of the kind of product that we're putting out. But also, I would love to look back after 15 years and there to be known that at Davis Burch Abrams, like lawyers are happy there. They live happy, healthy lives, and that to me that would be a win.
that's incredible. Um, I don't know why I feel led to clarify this, but like I said, we've talked about God a lot on this episode. You don't just serve Christians at your law firm.
No, no, definitely not.
I asked that question because I think some
Yeah,
people, might see Regent Law podcast, some of the stuff we're doing. We're very faith forward, not
yeah,
not scared at all to talk
yeah,
about God in the context of, I mean, like our law school, you don't have to be a Christian to come here, but we're teaching it from this perspective. And just like you guys, you serve people who have legal needs, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you said there's an advantage to knowing the Holy Spirit earlier, right?
Yeah.
Um, so before we finish the interview here, is there a story that you can think of where you were headed down a path to represent someone legally, you had a plan for it? It could just be in a conversation with the client or whatever, where you feel like, and like we said, we're going to demystify hearing from God as a Christian. The Holy Spirit lives inside of us. Where'd that idea come from? I've never heard the audible
Yeah.
voice of God either. And I say I heard from God often, and I've read the Bible for 25 years. I've read the Bible, and all of a sudden a thought comes, and I think, wow, that might have been too good of a thought for me. Is God speaking to me? So give me a story, one time when you're in the normal practice of law with a client or at the firm or something, when you thought, wow, I think God really led me in this moment, and you saw in retrospect that he indeed was.
Mm. By the way, let me just clarify that not all of my staff are Christian.
Yeah.
That's not a hiring criterion, and I would guess that a very small percentage of our clients are Christian. I don't know what that percentage is, but but yeah,
Which I,
but
which I love, which is the
yeah,
mission, right?
yeah,
We're not trying, what we're doing is we're trying to serve.
yeah,
We believe that serving people's legal needs, and especially if you can do it from a place of God's heart, you're expanding the kingdom of God. You're
yeah,
blessing people. You're bringing order to chaos. I
yeah,
love it. Thank you for clarifying that.
yeah. But
Do
I
you
do
have
have
a
a I got a story, yeah, that I'll share. It's coming to mind, and maybe I don't know if I shared this with you, maybe I did, but we had a client that came to us in a very unusual way. They're from many states over, and they found us and hired me, and were coming on board. And there was a motion. They just fired their prior counsel, or they were substituting out and bringing us in, middle of a $13 million lawsuit. And when I took over the case, I didn't realize until I was already engaged that there was a motion for summary judgment hearing against us that had been noticed for hearing in 3 weeks. And our brief hadn't been drafted. And so I'm brand new to the case, and I'm thinking, holy cow, I've got to get up to speed on this $13 million case and draft an opposition brief to summary judgment and get this thing filed. And if you've been practicing a while, that's that's a tough one.
A Herculean task.
Yeah. So I'm burning the midnight oil doing this, and kind of getting to the chase of some of the facts. But had been suing for fraud, my client that I just took over. And the other side said, well, yeah, but you say that there was this email that was evidence of the fraud, but you've never produced this email in discovery, and you didn't not attach to anything. And if you don't produce this email, then there's no fraud, so the court should enter summary judgment. It was a very good point that they were making. And so,
Yeah.
I'm new, and I call my client and say, hey, where's this email? And they say, we've been through 2 lawyers before you. We don't know where it is. We know that there was an email. We don't have it. We can't find it. So think of something to say. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do that? Now, this was right after I'd started the firm, and we did not have any quality e-discovery software at the time. We do now.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's no AI.
this is pre-AI.
Yeah.
And I mean, and even having e-discovery software back then, it was like relativity, and you got to be a big law to even afford it. And so anyway, the other side, I get this dump of hundreds of gigabytes of PDFs from the other side as part of the file transfer to me, and they were scanned images, not PDF readable, searchable. And they were all labeled by Bates stamp. And so you've got folders where you've got hundreds or probably thousands really of folders that are by Bates range. So it's this range to that range is the folder name, and inside of that folder name you have PDF documents that have a range of the Bates numbers in that PDF. And you open the PDF and it might have 2 pages or 2,000 pages. And they're they're not in any kind of order. They're not in chronological order.
They're
They're not
not
in top of order.
searchable file. There's
They're
no
not searchable.
keyword search.
Yeah, they might have actually been TIFFs, not PDFs. I can't remember, but you couldn't search, and so it was just maddening because you'd have to really have a pretty impressive software to OCR all of that, and then then you could search.
Does this feel like it's purposeful, or
Oh
whether it is?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they dumped it that way to to fulfill their obligation to produce, but make it difficult to respond. Anyway, so I've got all this stuff, and I've got 3 weeks, and the brief's got to be due probably a week before, 2 weeks before. So I there's no way I can review millions of documents. I don't, and I think I had maybe 2 lawyers working for me at the time.
Yeah.
So
And you don't have 8 law students working for
no,
free.
no, and I don't have relativity, and I don't have it's just humanly impossible and technically, there's just no way. So I decide I'm gonna, file some sort of Hail Mary brief as to, discovery is ongoing and it's too premature. And yes, we've
You're just trying to buy time.
I'm trying to buy time, and there's requests for admission that don't look good, and it's just bad. So anyway, it was late at night. I'm alone in the office, and I just stopped and I prayed. And I remember I just said, God, if this email's real and does exist, and you want me to find it, I'm gonna just pick one of these folders, just scroll down and pick one, and I'm just gonna, just pick a folder and look at a PDF, and if it's there, that's great, and if not, no problem. So I did. I just scrolled, picked a folder, and then there's all the PDFs, and I picked one and opened it up, and it wasn't a short PDF, it was a long PDF, and I'm just kind of scrolling through it. There it is. I've never seen it in my life. I'm looking at it, and I'm just like, holy cow. And so I took my phone and I took a picture of my screen, and I texted the client. My client is like loses their mind. How did you find it? That's the email. And so I got him on the phone, and he's like, "This is unbelievable. What did you do?" And I said, "I prayed." And he's like, "No, no, seriously, seriously." I said, "Seriously?" And he's like, "Okay, all right, yeah."
Yeah,
But
probably weirding him out at
it
this
weirded him
point.
out, actually. It did. I mean, but I took that, I attached it. We defeated their motion for summary judgment. And it was just like that's what I'm talking about. It's like, acknowledging the Lord, and I do feel like I have an unfair advantage because of that, not to be mystical or spooky or weird, because I'm not mystical or spooky or weird. I don't think I am, but I'm a very practical person. I believe that God doesn't move, or it doesn't steer non-moving ships. So you got to
Mhm.
get moving and do your part. And
Right.
creation, we're to partner with our Creator as part of it. So I think that's an important component. So you got to do your part, but then when you do your part and acknowledge the Lord, He provides help. And so there you have it.
Oh man, you kind of circle back on two things. One, acknowledgement. I mean, you're sitting there. Maybe it's a Hail Mary, help, God, help me.
Yeah.
But you're acknowledging that the God of the universe is there with you. I mean, if you don't acknowledge that, you're not going to talk to him,
Right.
you know? And then you said really quickly, God doesn't steer moving ships.
Non-moving ships.
Yeah. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So here you are at your office at night. You don't know what to do. You haven't, at some point, if you don't find it, and maybe after that prayer, if you don't find it, I think it's like, okay, you didn't create the problem. You're in a situation that's terrible. You do your best had you not found it. At some point, you have to close the folder and go home and go to sleep. But
Yeah.
here you are at night. You don't know what to do, but you're continuing to move. You're continuing to look while you probably do everything you can to not panic.
Yeah.
And you acknowledge God. You're still moving. I'm going to try one more time. And we don't always get the prayer answer we want in that moment, obviously. And it's not obviously always like that. But what a story!
Good.
I'm sure your client was asking you multiple times. No,
Yeah.
seriously, what'd you do?
Yeah. It's the truth.
Yeah, well, hey, Chris, thanks so much for
Welcome.
joining the podcast this morning. I'm excited to follow Burch Abrams to see what it looks like in 2040,
Yeah.
maybe even 2030. If someone wants to learn more about your firm, what's the easiest way to do that?
DavisBA.com.
Awesome. Here in Chesapeake, Virginia. If you're watching this show and you want to learn more about Regent Law School as well, we'll have information in the description below. But thanks again, Chris. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks. You too.